Okay, we have 11:45 and we have started the second part of today. And we have here Roman Tandlich, who is the second guy who deserves congratulations for. He was yesterday elected as the regional director for Africa in Teams. So congratulations, Roman. And to tell something about Roman, he has been working in the field of emergency and disaster management since the year 2011. With background in biotechnology, Dr. Tandlich got involved in the development of low-cost and decentralized sanitation technologies. During the rollout of one such technology, policy and technical skills shortages at local government level, this resulted in the shift of focus to research towards disaster management approaches towards shift action to address water, sanitation, and hygiene challenges in developing countries. This has led to the development of new teaching and research tools to deal with public health, disaster risk reduction, and development. Roman is originally from Slovakia, and where he completed his education up to master's level. This occurred in 1998, and his background was originally in biotechnology. He then continued on to complete his PhD in pharmaceutical sciences at North Dakota State University in Fargo, USA. After 2 postdoctoral fellowships, Roman joined the Faculty of Pharmacy of Rhodes University in South Africa in 2008. He has been with the same department since then and has recently been promoted there to the rank of associated professor. Congratulations. He has expertise in public health, water and sanitation, and disaster ethics. So, Roman, the floor is yours.
All right. Thank you, Yaroslav, for the kind introduction, and thank you very much for the opportunity to present. I will try to present a little bit of an introduction to some of the work that we have been doing, and that this is actually a theoretical paper that came out of the long-term engagement that I've had in working in data collection involving communities in South Africa, specifically in the Eastern Cape province of South Africa, where I'm based. And I would like to also acknowledge my co-authors, because this has been quite a, the paper took about 2.5 years to get together, and all the collaborators that you see as co-authors, I would like to extend my thanks for their contribution to the work. So let's get started. Let's go back to the current challenge that we all face, which is COVID-19. And everyone is, especially in the, pretty much all across the world, we are all trying to ask ourselves, both as disaster emergency management practitioners, but also as individuals, to say, why this again? Why another lockdown? And why the disruption to the way that we got used to the day before? Many times, and especially in the early stages of the pandemic, there was a lot of theories where the virus actually originated. Was it deliberate action? Was it man-made? Was it natural? Was it a combination, and such as being a NATEG or complex disaster? And if we are going to define it as a disaster, who should have the authority to do so? Is it a disaster? Is it only an emergency and a temporary state of a departure from normality that we will recover from relatively quickly? And if so, who is to define a disaster and tell us that COVID-19 actually is one? So do we have an authority like that? Is the fact that the WHO has declared COVID-19 a pandemic enough, or is there another way that we could look at this? So I'm not trying to be political here, but or try to push any agendas, but the truth of the matter is that in both the political realm, the public health realm, there have been various ways to track or suggest the origins of the COVID-19 pandemic, or more specifically, the SARS-CoV-2 virus that is the causative agents of this infectious disease. So there have been lab spillover theories. People have also said, based on some data, that there was a natural origin where it was originally an animal virus. and between passing from an animal reservoir, which used to be, it is indicated that it is a horseshoe bed, through an intermediate host, it then jumped the barrier to humans. However, the most comprehensive model that I could find has recently indicated, it was a paper that has now appeared in November 2021 by Frutos, where it says that the virus has actually circulated in the environment for quite some time, and that there was no direct evidence of any intermediate host. This was only based on analysis of genetic material and the potential comparison between two completely unrelated data sets. Further to this, there was evidence that lack of positive tests was done or detected in the personnel or samples taken from the personnel from the Wuhan Institute of Virology, which was suspected to have been a source of the lab spillover as one of the working theories. What it seems like now is that SARS-CoV-2 is rather an evolutionary jump from a predecessor virus, which has circulated between the animal and human populations for some time. And ultimately, the virus was, in a way, just looking for the receptor. It happened to find it, and when the mutations were sufficient, it jumped to humans. So what it looks like right now, it is that it was actually of natural origin, and it is very likely that humans got exposed to it based on encroaching on new spaces and through a process called anthropization, which means that we have gotten into areas that were previously wild or that humans have not interacted with, or thus we have come into contact with a virus that was previously isolated from any human interaction. Does the origin actually matter? In a way it does, and in a way it doesn't. And I will try to now unpack that a little bit further. So it does matter because the total economic loss so far has been estimated back in 2020 by Cutler and Summers to be about $16 trillion. This is a total impact of the shutdowns of businesses, lockdowns worldwide, and the overall disruption on the functionality of the globalized world in the 21st century. In a more controversial calculations have been done to indicate that up to $4.3 trillion could be linked to premature deaths from COVID-19, and about $2.5 trillion are likely to be the cost of treating the resulting comorbidities, such as long-term changes to the physiology of humanity, for example, long COVID, changes to taste perceptions, outcomes that we are currently still only discovering on a day-to-day basis. And finally, there was about $1.6 trillion, which is estimated to be the impact on the mental health of humanity. So it is fair to say that all of humanity has been affected, and we continuously on a daily basis through scientific discoveries, but also through personal stories which are shared through social media and other platforms, continue to discover new and new outcomes of what COVID-19 causes. Therefore, we can say that we need to ask ourselves the question, who holds the knowledge and the authority about what is correct knowledge and what is incorrect knowledge in the context of the unfolding impacts of COVID-19, and also who should have the which knowledge should be primary to the solution to the solution of all the problems that the pandemic continues to cause. So in a way, one of my master students has been working on this, and we have recently completed 2 manuscripts where we try to look at the parallel existences of the humanity and the virus, and then try to see if there are implications for disaster risk reduction and emergency management. So what this figure illustrates is the fact that the virus and humanity have basically coexisted, what it looks like, for quite some time. Not the virus in the form of SARS-CoV-2, but the predecessor viruses, and ultimately currently SARS-CoV-2 and humanity coexist, because survival of one is dependent on the other, and the virus has negatively impacted and continues to impact human life. Once the virus enters a host cell, which means infection takes place, there must be the ACE2 receptor, which means there must be structural compatibility between the virion and the host cell. And then the virus uses the human cells to reproduce and to spread. Now, this model is based on the virus cell life cycle model of a virus in general. So we're not trying to say that this is specifically how the virus spreads. What it does say or tries to illustrate is that humanity and the virus are currently interconnected in a way, how they impact each other, how they depend on each other, and how they negatively impact, how the virus has negatively impacted the existence of humanity. At the same time, what it does say is that once a human being is infected and its host cells start producing the virus, it is necessary for the humans to adjust their living lifestyle to maintain a state where they can live with the virus, but at the same time continue functioning and the society continues to go on. Now, in a way, what on a slightly more abstract level, we can say that the COVID-19 case clearly demonstrates what we have called a balance between two types of reality, which currently impact how the disaster is unfolding. The one is the fundamental reality, which are laws of nature and the way that the nature functions. For example, this can be demonstrated by the evolution of the virus to the state where it could have taken its genetic information, evolved, and ultimately infected the humans. But the evolution itself is independent of human reality. The crisscrossing between the virus and the humanity actually took place when humans encroached on territory that was previously unoccupied by them. And this has then resulted in the virus jumping the barrier to humanity. And it is affecting everyday life, which we have called situational reality, which means that every human being and the factors of how they go about their daily business, in other words, how the emergency and disaster of COVID-19 impacts them, is determined by the virus and by the crisscrossing of the results of the evolution and the everyday life of fundamental and situational reality. In this realm, citizen science becomes important. Why is it? Because citizen science is a field that has been around for a long time. Simply put, lay persons are people that are not trained scientists, whether these are biomedical scientists or people that are working in cybersecurity, people that are working in understanding how complex phenomena such as systems in disasters work. Interaction takes place between laypersons who are not trained in a specific field, for example, disaster risk reduction, but these laypersons are directly impacted or involved in collecting data, which can then be used to assess the impacts and the space in which a disaster unfolds. Now, citizen science can thus be defined as a data collection and execution of various types of activities, which are scientific in nature, and the data produced can also be used to draw scientific conclusions about a hypothesis or a problem trying to be solved, for example, the socioeconomic impact of COVID-19. But the data collection is done by non-scientists or members of the general public. Now, impacts of this citizen science can be produced. I will show a few examples on the next couple slides, but ultimately, what does this do? Citizen science provides a link in which an everyday experience of a human being that is not necessarily scientific in nature becomes scientific due to the fact that they are involved in data collection, and the data is then used to solve a scientific problem. So an example of citizen science activity can be seen in the context of COVID-19 and other areas, and this is from the baseline of where I come from. This is provision of drinking water in areas that are either not reticulated with piped water or where treatment needs to take place after the tap has been opened. This is a device which is called a tippy tap, or it's an example of a tippy tap. Water is placed inside here, and there is a mechanism, generally a set of either pulleys or ropes, which are used to tip the bucket over, and then soap can be provided in the vicinity. And outside, for example, a public health facility, this can be used to maintain personal hygiene in the context of COVID. On the other hand, one of the longest running citizen science data collections has been the so-called Big Dip, which takes place in North America, and it is focused on collecting data on the clarity or turbidity of water resources by dipping a disc into a water body and measuring the depth at which the disc disappears, and this can then be used as a measure of pollution and problems with turbidity, which can then be used to indicate where cleanup or other sources of pollution might need to be looked into. Citizen science, in the context of COVID-19, from where I and my co-authors stand, can then be used as a mechanism to look at the data collection of the impacts of the disaster on all of humanity, because all of humanity has a vested interest in the survival, whether this is at the level of an individual or the level of all of humanity. And thus, any action that we take in the context of our daily lives, we posit or we look at as being produced as data that can be used to understand how the disaster impacts local, regional, and a global level, and how this can then be used to tweak interventions to minimize the impact or solve outbreaks, can be used and can be made a little bit more targeted at the and taking into account in real time data that provides a complete or holistic picture about impact on individual humans. What is thus our link between disaster management and citizen science, simply put, is this: anytime that anyone produces data, we heard a lot about social media monitoring yesterday. We heard a lot about brilliant work that is being done by other presenters about using data in real time to predict certain events, for example, acts of maybe public violence. But what it also is important to consider is that during the COVID-19, people have posted a lot of information on social media from various locations around the world, and they have demonstrated and documented their experiences throughout lockdowns, throughout loss of jobs, mental health problems, separations from family, which means that they have told their many times qualitative stories that document how the situational reality of COVID-19 has actually unfolded. Taking this knowledge into account and using it as a source of data which we can see to transpire in real time can provide a new way to look at how the impacts of disasters are taking place in real time. And at the same time, it must be seen as the fact that all of humanity has a vested interest in overcoming the impacts of COVID-19, either learning to live with the disease and survive, or try to find ways to prevent further outbreaks becoming pandemics in the near future. In order to do this, the knowledge that every human produces carries value and thus should be considered as a valuable source of information in line with the creation of knowledge being democratic and in the lines of the principles of epistemic justice. This justice must be struck between disaster risk managers, emergency managers, government officials, and public that they serve. In this case, we can say that social media posts, as discussed eloquently and really brilliantly by speakers, newspaper articles in a slightly different context, personal stories must be seen as new type of data and in a way as sources of citizen science information. It is true that all the data analysis tools that we have seen so far provide a way to measure the validity and scrutinize the data in a way that can provide the most useful use of this data in extracting information that can be used for localized, regionalized, or global decision-making. One way to look at it, for example, today would be the Omicron variant, which has recently occurred. South African scientists have alerted the world to its existence. And later on, two things happened. Number one, travel restrictions were placed on South Africa as a preventative measure. But at the same time, while these were in place, it was discovered that prior to the announcement of the Omicron by South African scientists, the existence of Omicron, there have already been positive samples that were tested later on from, I believe, the Netherlands, which means that balance must be struck in the context of the data and how it is interpreted. And all of humanity must start looking at taking collective decisions along the lines of who produced the data, how it is used, and who owns the outcomes. And for that, I have my references. I would like to thank you for the opportunity to present, and I would be happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Roman, to you and the whole team. It is very interesting actual presentation. So let's look for some questions. I would have a question. I would like to ask you about if the motivation just by explanation of the situation is enough, or if you are using in those projects other kind of motivation of citizens to measure anything.
Thank you very much. So I apologize if the presentation was a little too abstract and too philosophical, but the point is that ultimately one thing has emerged from COVID-19 quite importantly, and that is that there is an imbalance in power relationships across the globe, and also at local level when it comes to access to resources such as vaccines, the way that the manufacturing and distribution is structured. And what is currently important is not the reason, it is important to understand the reasons of how we got here, but at the same time, it is clear from COVID-19 that a lot of new opportunities have been created. And if we allow for the majority of, or as many voices to be heard when decisions about the future and post-COVID world are taken, and the more voices are heard, aka the more citizens are involved in creating or providing data that can help shape the decisions about the future, the more I think we will find a way to counter any future pandemics and also provide solutions to, for example, another big problem which Kyle mentioned earlier, and that is, for example, migrations, because those are on the African continent, especially in South Africa, is a big problem with this due to, for example, country like Zimbabwe, which is next door and has had many economic and other challenges. There's been a major influx of refugees. So I think that would be the answer. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I can see no other question. So thank you once more for your presentation. Roman will be presenting one more paper this afternoon. He is working with the team, which is in the program. So it's very nice work, what they are doing. So now I would like to call for Amelie Grangeat. She will be presenting the paper Citizens' Resilience and Public Warning Systems. To present Amelie, Dr. Amelie Grangeat is particularly responsible for the Belgian national warning system. She advises the various European governments on the implementation of such national projects. She regularly shares her experience in the field of critical infrastructure protection at international conference and has also several international scientific publications on resilience, crisis management, and vulnerability analysis. Since 2016, Dr. Amelie Grangeat has been working on her PhD on the topic of vulnerability, resilience, and cascade effect between technical networks, contributions of systemic and spatial modeling to crisis planning and management for the benefit of network operators and civil security. As part of this work, she has worked on the application of these concepts for the Paris Fire Brigade. She has also participated in 3 French research projects and 3 European FP7 projects dealing with critical infrastructure resilience, crisis management, or public warning systems. For her research, she received the Cybernet Young Critics Award 2016. So congratulations to that. And please, Amelie, the floor is yours.
So thank you for this introduction. I'm Dr. Amelie Grangeat, as you said. I'm especially working on everything which is related to public warning system at different countries level. So I would like to share a little bit about this practitioner talk and how public warning system can improve citizens' resilience. So first, maybe a little bit of context. We all know more and more disasters. Disasters are really becoming the new normal. We have a lot of increase of droughts, of storms, a lot of tropical cyclones, at least more and more, and this is partially linked to climate change. But we have also a lot of different types of incidents, like cyber incidents, which has become one of the biggest risk for every companies actually, but also for citizens. And we have, of course, these human threats with a lot of terrorist attacks and the war situations. So what we can see is that, of course, all these disasters are very, very different, but they all have in common that they threaten the life of people. And it's one of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals to help diminish the number of deaths and the number of people affected by these disasters. So the question is, how do we achieve this goal? So first of all, it needs a holistic approach of the crisis management, because of course every crisis are different, and the common points are all citizens. So how do you protect the citizens? How you help these citizens to be resilient? And it's partially linked to the existence of a public warning system. So first of all, I've said we need a holistic approach before, during, and after a crisis event. Public warning system is really just one piece of the crisis management that we should have for in front of all these different disasters. The first step is, of course, everything which is risk monitoring. We had just before a talk about the COVID, where you have citizens, but also scientists who monitor the different variants and new variants of the COVID. This is part of the risk monitoring. This is also part of the prevention. And you have also a very important part, which is planning. Planning will help you to save citizens' life. And it's also a very important part to integrate within your strategy of the population alerting. Training and practicing, that's no big news, but it's all necessary steps to have done before the incidents if you want to be prepared and to achieve this citizens' resilience. Then, of course, you have an incident, whatever it is. That's the holistic approach. And then here, it's very important to alert and notify every citizen about the situation, what you are going to do, the different actions undertaken, the actions to be taken for being, for protecting yourself. And of course, it's the lifeline of the citizen. So an indication of everything which is going evaluate. And then of course, saying an all clear message saying the situation is over. Then you have the crisis management itself. And of course, at the end, the recovery part. So here as a practitioner talk, I'm going to speak only about public warning system, but it's very important to understand that it's just one piece of the citizens' resilient brick, which is the holistic approach of a crisis. Here, a little bit of context first. You may have noticed that I'm French. In Europe, we have a European Electronic Communication Code, which says that every member state must have a public warning system which goes through the mobile network operators by June 2022. So it's very short. These days, a lot of member states, have already started the work on public warning system. Some others need still to do it. So I would like just to give a little bit of context. What is really important in public warning system and written within this electronic communication code is the fact that these citizens, for being effective in alert, implies that the citizens can receive it without prior subscription. It's really, really important because we have seen in the past situations like applications, like subscription websites for broadcasting alerts. The problem is that people feel safe before they are hit by an event. So if you don't, if you rely your public warning system only on alerting channel, which needs a prior subscription, then you lack of efficacy. And one key point of this article 110 is the necessary efficiency of your public warning system for building this citizens' resilience. So concretely, what does it mean? Before June 2022, every crisis manager in the Europe member states must be able to warn every handset located in an area without prior subscription. In terms of practice, because it's a practitioner talk, it implies to deploy location-based SMS or the cell broadcast technology. So I would like to introduce those two technology for you. Cell broadcast and location-based SMS, the two main difference between those technology is the fact that cell broadcast is a one-to-N technology, while SMS is a one-to-one technology. I explained myself. Cell broadcast will be a radio wave broadcasted around the antenna, so everyone around will receive it. While the one-to-one technology of the location-based SMS is a SMS, meaning you must know to who you are going to send the SMS. So cell broadcast, I said that it was a radio wave. It means it's a unidirectional communication. It means that you are totally blind in terms of crisis management and how many people you have in the field. However, you know that you have broadcasted a wave of alerts, and that's every people within this wave have received it. It's really interesting because it's not exposed to the risk of network congestion, which is a main case within the alerts situation, because in crisis management, you can have some network congestions. However, as I said, you are totally blind on how many people needs, for instance, to evacuate. While location-based SMS, it's a one-to-one transmission. It's a classical SMS, just it's sent to every handset located within the area of danger. Meaning it's a classical SMS, you have no worry about the device compatibility. However, and it's bidirectional, which means that you can send back a message, I need help. However, it's not suitable when your network is, of course, congested. Why I talk about those two, they are totally complementary. Meaning cell broadcast, when you must inform a lot of people, like millions of people about the war, it will be probably the most suitable alerting channel. However, when you receive the cell broadcast, your phone rings and make a lot of noise and you can't change it. And this cell broadcast technology is just not suitable when you have an hostage situation, because if you have an hostage situation, it means that everyone who is hidden or hiding from a terrorist, for instance, will be found by this terrorist because your mobile network will ring. So for instance, cell broadcast really useful, but never in case of an hostage situation. While location-based SMS, of course, suitable for terrorist attack, will be better probably in a local crisis, because everyone will receive it and you are more used to an SMS and you can handle the answers as well. So it's two different technology. And yes, I forgot to say location-based SMS, because it's a one-to-one technology. As a crisis manager, you can have the confirmation of reception of every alert which is broadcasted, which means that you are legally covered. You can say that these people have well received an alert, and this is really important for your own safety. So you have two technology which must be implemented by June 22 by every member state of the by every European member state, sorry. But of course, that's just one deadline, and the citizens' resilience don't stop at June 2022 with these two technologies. We have above the question of the satellites and the division of broadcast of this alert toward the population via satellite. You know that the Europe has implemented and has developed a constellation of satellites, which are called Galileo. And by a European directive, all smartphones must be compatible with the GPS signal of Galileo in 2020. Sorry. The important point is that the European Commission has anticipated to save some few bytes of this signal, of this Galileo signals, for broadcasting the alerts. It's not yet made, meaning prototypes are ongoing for defining how to use it, because it's a critical infrastructure. And as you know, cyber incidents are very critical, especially on critical infrastructure. So it's very sensitive. It's a very sensitive project. However, it's important to say that in 2023, we should have operational infrastructure for being able to broadcast public warning via satellite, which is super interesting, especially on the case of cross-border emergencies, because you know that flood or toxic floods doesn't stop at the border. So this satellite will be extremely useful for this kind of crisis. Just one point to say, as a crisis manager, while location-based SMS and cell broadcast, you could choose the text you want to warn the people. Here with satellite, it won't be possible. Why so? Because those few bytes within the Galileo signal are not long enough for onboarding a text. So meaning it's a predefined text, and these few bytes will onboard only short code that the phone will interpret as an alerting signal. It's an important point for crisis manager. It means that it's not free text, so you can't send every information you want within those Galileo signal. It's one limitation of the Galileo satellite. Nevertheless, those three technologies are really important for the citizens' resilience, because it can broadcast the alerts whenever you want without prior subscriptions, whenever you are in danger. So here we have talked about mobile network operators technology, so cell broadcast location, based SMS, but also GPS signal. The common points, because it's a practitioner talk, so how do you trigger all those key medias for saving life of people? It's all the time via what we call the common alerting protocol. So this common alerting protocol is really an important technical tool for the resilience of the citizens. I'm going to explain what is the common alerting protocol just after, but just so that you understand, this common alerting protocol connects every alerting system you can already have with the different operators or I would call alert broadcasters that you have on the right of this screen. So a common alerting protocol, what is this? It's a general format for exchanging all hazard emergency alerts and public warning over all kinds of networks. So first important point, it's an open standard. You can find it, there's a reference on this slide, and it's really a protocol to be advertised all around the world, because it can help a lot towards the interoperability of the alerts between the different countries, but also between the different systems. So it's a common alerting protocol created in 2001, so quite old actually, and it's used all over the world, especially with meteorological agencies all over the world. But it's not yet used within every alerting channel. So if we have decision makers within these rooms, please push this common alerting protocol to be used by a lot of different alerting channels, because it will help those crisis managers to broadcast the alerts over a lot of different networks. So one important point, this common alerting protocol, which is an international standard, is good, but it's like the grammar of the alerts. It's good, but it doesn't define a language. So every country has its own CAP version. So we have a lot, I've participated to a research project to compare different CAP profiles. And so here is just a piece of results here on this CAP. What you need to know is that a CAP is made of several blocks, 4 blocks. The blocks concerning the alerts, the blocks concerning the information of the alerts, the blocks of the resources linked to these alerts, it will be the audio file, for instance, and the area of description of danger. So if I go further on this CAP, what is really important in every corner, it says that it's mandatory to have the language, the event category, the level of urgency, severity, certainty that you have within this alert, and also the title, the event description, and the instruction, what you need to do. You have also everything which is related to the area. So this common alerting protocol will help you to structure the alert. It's really the grammar of the alert. However, here we are talking about a language, which is a discussion between a machine and another, an alerting software and mobile network operators or GPS or public boards or applications. It contains everything you need to know about the alert. However, it's certainly not like that you are going to communicate to the public. For instance, in terms of best practice, we know that when we need to communicate to the public an alerting system, it's better to structurate it, for instance, like we know, so explaining the fact without interpretation, we do, so what are the actions ongoing? We care, so we give you advices or instructions to the population, and we show that the authority as well managing the situation. And we will be back, meaning when will be the next communication? So what can you see here? We know that common alerting protocol is the grammar of the alert, but it doesn't define you how you want to structurate and make this message clear toward the population. So it's a very good tool for enabling this automatic broadcast of the alert toward different, very interesting media. However, at the end, you must know how to structurate the alert based on what is within the CAP, but you must still be a human talking to human, meaning using words. So the message content will be different than just the CAP. So this is why we have, the CAP is a key point of the resilience toolkit, but the user interface on top of this CAP, so meaning the user interface of the alerting software, will need to add an additional layer of business logic who will help the user, meaning the crisis manager, to write, based on those CAP fields, an alert message who must be clear and understandable by the citizens who will receive it. So that's an additional layer in terms of practice on how to build this resilience. It's a practitioner talk, so I'm going to explain you a little bit about a practical, an official situation, But just before to say, we have talked about location-based SMS cyber broadcast satellite, the CAP gateway, which is towards the application, but you must still understand the importance of classical channels, which are not CAP for the moment, which will be like, for instance, sirens. It's really important when you are speaking about crisis that you use a multi-channel approach and not only one of the three medias that we have talked just before. So, practitioner talk, July's floods 2021 within Belgium. So it's what is really important here is that it's a cross-border event, meaning it was really at the German border. You have one important thing, on Belgium, you have a public warning system, on Germany not. Or not without prior subscription, which is a key information here. So important points, we had a meteorological depression blocked on Belgium and Germany with an extreme precipitation during 48 hours above the century level. We had, for instance, in Belgium, 37 casualties. So we had even a day of national mourning. It gives you how hard it was for Belgian people. And you must know that in Liège city, so it's one of the main cities of Belgium, there were a kind of dam upstream, which were under construction and couldn't regulate correctly the flow of the river, which was already at their century level, with a high huge of risk dam breaks, winning a kind of tsunami towards Liège. So we needed to evacuate Liège. But of course, this century flood has not impacted Brabant Wallon, not only Liège, but also the other region like Brabant Wallon, Hainaut, and so on and so forth. So it's really important here to say that public warning system has saved life, because the same event on the Germany border has cost more than 100 lives. So it's really why you can say public warning system actually saved lives. So important point as well, we talk about public warning, but it's also public information. Meaning in this case, we have sent 60 alerts over 37 municipalities, but we have also sent 40 information campaigns, meaning please be prepared, please prepare to evacuate. what is the current situation, and then at the end you can come back, it's all safe. We have talked, so that was for flood, but just an open discussion on COVID as well. We have talked about location-based SMS, cell broadcast satellite. This has very intrusive channels, so please don't use it for a long-time crisis like COVID, which is the difference between, I would say, classical channels like mails, like radio or information website, versus those intrusive channels. Because here, this COVID crisis, and it has been said just before by our by my colleague, the crisis seems to be the new normal, meaning it's no more a need of a warning system, but I'm opening the fields to an information system, less intrusive, but as well very important. So that's the conclusion. The public warning system is really the lifeline of the citizens during crisis for helping them building their resilience. Please don't use only one channel when you are in crisis, because you must cover all kinds of targeted citizens, and every media has their different advantages. Common alerting protocol is really a protocol to encourage for better interoperability between alerting channels, but also between countries. We have seen an example of cross-border events. But CAP is well only a tool, and it must be adapted each time to authorities' needs and especially crisis management process within each of the within each of the country. Thank you very much for your attention, and I stay at your disposal for the potential questions.
Merci beaucoup. And we look for some questions. No questions so far. So I would have maybe not question, but comment. It was very informative presentation. Thank you for that. Really very technically very well. And I would like to stress and go back to the Germany floods you mentioned in your presentation, because even if we have such an excellent tools, technical tools, what appeared there, the people, especially in Germany, as I heard, they didn't believe even that they got a lot of information and in time. They didn't believe, and they couldn't estimate by themselves personally what might really happen. So they went to the places where they died. So they didn't obey the rules. Maybe they didn't know about the rules, because it might be due to the if we would misuse, you mentioned that, not misuse these warning messages because people don't believe them after that. So this is one comment, and second comment might be when I recall what Roman talk about this big exercise with COVID, and with this, and he had this his presentation of the monitoring. I believe that the location-based SMS system might be used probably for this local and citizen monitoring, because it allows to send some little data backwards to the operators. So probably it might be another direction how to involve people, not only get the information that something is happening, but also to give the information back from the very place that they are just now. So this is what just comments. And there is a question. Good presentation. How does the alert system encompass messages to disabled people, deaf or blind?
Yeah, so very good question. Thank you very much. Actually, for that, we take them into account, but you must subscribe before, because we don't know whether you are blind or deaf. So it's important that you subscribe. We propose each time a subscription website where you can say whether you have handicapped, and you also can declare your area of interest. And it means that we can dedicate to you a special channel. So meaning if you're blind, we will send you more of a call message, for instance, but it means that you have subscription. And also if you declare yourself as an handicapped person and as an authority, we know there's a danger there that where you could have difficulties, for instance, to evacuate, then we can adapt it and send the adequate resources, not only for the alert, but also for the help of the evacuation.
Okay, thank you. And that's it. Once more, thank you a lot for your interesting presentation. And we are at the last presentation until the lunch. And we will have here Michel Bour and Damien Ballereau. Probably Michel Bour is coming, and they will present the boosting citizens' awareness with the support of fire and rescue practitioners to accelerate implementation of the SENDAI framework. Something about Michel. He is manager of the European Fire In project, former senior firefighter officer, chief of the Upper Rhine Fire and Rescue Service. He is civil and geotechnical engineer, has diploma of advanced studies in fluid mechanics. From 2011 to 19 was general secretary of the CTIF, International Association of Fire and Rescue Services. Former responsible of cross-border cooperation with the German emergency services and the Swiss emergency services, all under the aegis of the Franco-German-Swiss Upper Rhine Conference. So, please, it's your floor.
Good morning, everybody. My presentation. So, I will talk about boosting citizens' awareness with the support of fire and rescue practitioners to accelerate implementation of the SENDAI framework, and my presentation is based on the outcome of the Fire In project. As a reminder, SENDAI framework, we have 4 priorities. 1, understanding disaster risk. 2, strengthening disaster risk governance to manage the disaster risk. Priority 3 is investing in disaster risk reduction for resilience. And priority 4, enhancing disaster preparedness for effective response and to build but better in recovery, rehabilitation, and reconstruction. The Fire In project, Fire and Rescue Innovation Network. And as I said, the outcome of the presentation I give you as a result of the work of 5 thematic working groups. I make this presentation after a short presentation of Safe Cluster, which is the coordinator of this project. The consortium has 14 partners. You can see spread all around Europe. And Safe Cluster is a competitiveness cluster in Aix-en-Provence, working in aeronautics, space, security, safety, defense, and environment sectors. He is also a member of the network of European Security Cluster and collaborates in the research and development programs of the European Commission. The mission of Safe Cluster in this part of resilience and environment are to support the network in the development of technologies for service for the security and safety of citizens and users in cities, federate and create links between different actors, solution providers, and end users. What is the main objective of Fire In? The Fire In main objective is to improve the national and European fire and rescue capability development process by fostering innovation in this domain and promoting innovative solutions to recognize the needs. Fire In addresses a concern that capability-driven research and innovation in this area need much stronger guidance from practitioners and better exploitation of the technology potentially available for the discipline. And you can find and follow us on our internet webpage, firein.eu, on Twitter, LinkedIn, and on YouTube. Fire In has 5 thematic working groups: search and rescue, emergency service, structure fire, landscape fires, natural hazard, CB, REN, and 3 main identified needs by the consortium of the project. 1, improving awareness, preparation, and training of the population based on the observation that in the event of a major crisis, the civil protection response is hampered if the population is not prepared. 2, common procedure of interoperable tools for sharing information and common inter-service inter-border training. And further, tools and procedures for information and data sharing with the population and field workers in real time during the crisis. First, identified need, improving awareness, preparation, and training of the population, based on the observation that in the event of a major crisis, the civil protection response is hampered if the population is not prepared. I make an overview of current and future common capability challenges identified in the project about the community involvement. To develop public self-protection and awareness, train, educate, involve general population on risk awareness and self-protection in a basic and easy way. Train about knowledge of risk and appropriate behaviors so that they understand the implication of their own decisions. Differentiate subgroups of population depending on vulnerability, accessibility, impact potential. Provide tools to facilitate decision-making for potential victims, checklists to evaluate potential risks to the properties, emergent kits. Proactively maintain the citizens continuously informed during all the duration of the emergency. Disseminate instruction to apply in case of risk in order to strengthen appropriate population reaction, manage alarm system. Invest on communication during emergency. It's very important, the communication. In an integrated way, at home, inside the community, at work, free time. Search the most effective communication channel to disseminate selected message for the population during emergency, TV, radio, social networks, press conference. We have the choice. Community involve communities and case stakeholders as active actors in risk management. Involve communities into driving a change of paradigm for society, from victims to actors in the emergency, from we authorities will protect you to you citizens should be actively involved. Build trust involving communities and case stakeholders in risk management permanently. The problem is that large emergencies are infrequent and people rely on luck and responders to protect them. Plan and prepare the involvement of volunteers and other civil society members in the emergencies, perform communication campaigns targeted to specific communities with messages, exchanges, and media carefully studied, and access of the public to emergency plans. Involve case stakeholders and conventions and towards an integrated culture of risk awareness and resilience. Building on and transform the memory of historical catastrophe. The problem is that people forget what happened before they arrived here on the earth. Educate children and young ones as actors on the emergency, building risk awareness, tolerance, and resilience. Involve journalists and mass media, perform training on means for mass information, social media, smartphone, short videos. Invest in credibility in the communication during the emergency. Build trust, explaining in a transparent way what can happen, explaining the final possible scenarios of the emergency. Negotiate the values with communities before the emergency. Negotiate with communities and key stakeholders before the emergency on the scenario of resolution. Responders during emergencies make decisions that can have long-term impacts beyond their knowledge and expertise. Involve society into negotiating the accepted risk in front of different alternative scenarios of resolution of the emergency. Build on early alerts to make communities aware of risk, encourage in self-action in the direction that favors the resolution of the emergencies. A cultural change towards risk tolerance and resilience. Be aware of the price to pay when choosing certainty. Have priorities, agreed, work on the values to protect previous to emergencies. This choice and the creation of certain scenarios can leave out some situation because in every choice there is also a renunciation. So there is a price to pay when choosing something certain in uncertain events. Explain uncertainty and involve potential skeptics, suspicious, and disagreement. A part of society may be opposed to losing an area to lose a land. It is important to explain the uncertainty to society so that they can understand that there will be times when decisions will be made on the basis of previously agreed and shared values and involve them in the scenarios and decisions, opening a dialogue on values and priorities whenever possible prior to emergencies. Focus on the short windows of opportunity after emergencies. After large disaster, there is a short window of opportunity to change policies and governance towards an integral risk management, and that's important for our politicians. I will give some examples. The first is the Black Saturday wildfires in Australia, 7 February 2009. In these days, they have 179 people perished, 400 people hospitalized, 3,500 buildings destroyed, including 2,000 houses. The research after this Black Saturday highlighted limited awareness and preparedness for bushfire risk, a tendency for people to leave or evacuate at the last moment, the inadequacy of preparedness and defensive actions in fires burning under what are now considered catastrophic fire danger conditions. The research also compiled evidence and example of highly effective preparedness and response. That is a good information. A paradigm change for fire service from spending to fires with ever more resources to engaging the population and placing more responsibility in the hands of preparedness and during crisis. It is our change of paradigm. Two examples of involvement of citizens in wildfire risk reduction and fire prevention, the FireWise and FireSmart programs. FireWise is in the USA. It is an NFPA program with sponsored by the United States Department of Agriculture Forest Service and National Association of State Foresters. Several actions can citizens organize to not be exposed to wildfire, and the communities can be more aware of the risk and less vulnerable. The FireWise program landed in Europe a few years ago with a lot of potential to make a difference in continent that is densely populated, and most of its population lives in wildland urban interface, and our colleagues from the Paul Costa Foundation are the partner of the NFPA's wildfire. Another program is FireSmart Canada. FireSmart Canada is a national initiative to help property owners and communities understand the way in which wildfire may threaten structures and property located in and close to forested and wildland areas, and the steps individuals and communities can take to reduce the susceptibility of buildings and property to fire. The FireSmart program is implemented through 7 disciplines to help neighborhoods address the threat of wildfire: education, emergency planning, vegetation management, legislation, development, interagency, cooperation, and cross-training. Second, identified need: common procedure, interoperable tools for sharing information, and common inter-service, inter-border training. Crises of cross-border nature make it difficult to identify the current event. Authorities need to enable effective collective action in the face of transborder problems that no member state can address on their own. And for that, I make a feedback on the health crisis induced by the COVID-19 pandemic. As soon as the COVID-19 has started to challenge the fire and rescue service in Europe, Fire-In has also become a focal point for practitioners to deposit and share best practice, guidelines, and innovations. In that perspective, it has served as a shared and remote testbed to improve the response capability faced to a common challenge in the whole Europe and beyond. That is when you go on our webpage and you have the first page, and you can see COVID-19 best practice and guidelines from the European and the Fire Rescue Service, and how you can share your best practice. That is a list of the best practice and recommendation you can find. We have the Fire In newsletter, and for the COVID-19, we made a special edition from best practice and guidelines from the European Fire and Rescue Service, guidelines, recommendation in English only, and online course in different languages. We organized a specific event dedicated by practitioners for practitioners. It was a just-in-time training provided to practitioners to enable the rapid acquisition of specific skills or knowledge when the need arises. It was organized with 5 pan-European networks, Fire In, Iheanetu, Media, No Fear, and they were invited to participate in live webinars with featured top speakers from different backgrounds in order to provide first-hand information experience gained from real disaster. Only for the presentation, No Fear is a network of practitioners for emergency medical system. Media is a Mediterranean and Black Sea Security Practitioners Network. Iheanetu, the Danube River Region Resilience Action Network, and Iheanetu, European Network of Civilian Training Centers, European project, all of them, and we work together. Communication you had in June from this year from the Commission to European Parliament about this COVID-19 pandemic, 3 lessons learned for future health response, the decisive role of the coordination in EU, the resilience of the EU policy coordination system, and the role on the global stage. You have 10 lessons of the COVID-19 for the public health policy. You have lesson 1, faster detection and response depends on stronger global surveillance and more and complete data. You have lesson 2, clear and coordinated scientific advice facilitates policy decision and public communication. Lesson 4, emergency tools need to be ready faster and easier to activate. 5, coordinated measures should become a reflex for Europe. 9, pandemic preparedness and response is a global priority for Europe. And lesson 10, a more coordinated and sophisticated approach to misinformation and disinformation must be developed. The third identified need: tools and procedure and data sharing with the population and field workers in real time during the crisis. In this case, I have specific community awareness rising. Information on risk like flash flood, dike breaches compulsory if a person buys a property or builds a houses. I take the example of a flash flood. This is an image from an event last year in the south of France. The public should be engaged into pre-disaster awareness projects such as river cleanings, and licensed persons in case of disaster should be identified within the community. Information of the public with concrete risk broken down on the area of affected households and companies is required with advice how to mitigate risk. Training of all groups involved and hit by flash flood in the same language and a simple way to read data and early warning. Here, about early warning, you have the directives of the European Parliament from December 2018 establishing the European Electronic Communication Code, Article 110, Public Warning System. By June 21 in 2022, Member States shall ensure, you can read, the public warning system. We hope that for next year, June 2020, we could have the application and that it works, this public warning system you can read in this article. Digital devices. Crisis management still uses few digital devices, however, they allow more precise reaction and a reduction in cost. They make it possible to warn the population before crisis, but also to be fair enough to minimize false alarm, which would gradually attack the confidence of the population. This help is all the more important as any crisis involves reaction handicapped by due to the event and greater than normal needs. But we have more and more projects for the moment. And the last example is a call, which deadline was the 23rd of November of this year, about integrated disaster risk mitigation for extreme climate events from early warning system to long-term adaptation and resilience building. So you see, we in the next time we must have, and we could have more and more of some project about digital devices. Another current project in France is a project named the Puma X Platform Universal Multi-Alert Platform. The need is to search and visualize all available information, process the data for decision support, visualize the information in synthetic way, mobilize the required resources, and alert citizens in danger in a targeted way. Its goal is to create a multi-risk operable platform where data would be processed in real time to enable decision support. Example, a municipal lifeguard plan will be coupled with 3D mapping of the territory in order to improve the deployment of relief efforts, and everything will be accessible online from a separate public cloud. So you have to feed and the platform, and after you have a response in dynamic plans, cartography, remote alerts. You have the vigilance about weather, meteorologic information. Another example is a private society. Predict is a private company from France with a team of experts, expertise in hydraulics and hydrology, meteorology, satellite imagery, and they can assist the risk manager before, during, after risk phenomena. They help municipalities to manage the risk. They have 24 per day, 7-day week, continuous hydrometeorological monitoring. And they have designed a decision support system, MyPredict, which is an application helping citizens to adapt the right attitude. And with this application, you can access the analysis of the risk in the community and preventive instructions adapted to the extent of the phenomenon concerning you. So, thank you for staying.
Thank you very much for your informative presentation. It was a lot of information, interesting activities around. I just, obviously, if there are some questions, not yet. I may ask you, this Fire-In project, is it ongoing project which is just an activity, or is it project which will end at some time?
The project is ending in next year, ending October 2022, end of October.
Okay, so then the dissemination might be very interesting and follow up from this project, because there is a lot of very wise advices which is coming out of it. Okay, I will look for some question. No. Okay, thank you once more.
Thank
very
you,
much.
Jaroslav.
Thank
Bye.
everybody from the this part of our conference, and I wish you having a nice lunch. And after lunch, we will meet again at 1 o'clock with next presentation. Thank you. Have a good lunch.